multiracial purple butterflies. So that's the icebreaker for tonight. And once again, I am honored tonight to be the host of the How to Overcome Life's Challenges Summit. And our first speaker tonight needs no introduction. It's Bryant. Hello, great to be here tonight. So my name is Bryant, and before I get started, I just want to say I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. You know, I'm really passionate about this subject tonight, how to overcome racism. Okay. So you all are entitled to your opinion, but know that I wouldn't be speaking here if I believe I couldn't offer something of value. So also, know that before I got on stage, people were still trying to whisper in my ear, you can't talk about this. Don't tell them how to overcome it. You know, they who I'll define at the end of the talk don't want you to hear what I'm about to say tonight. In fact, practically all the messages you hear nowadays are teaching you and brainwashing you to not overcome racism. Think about that. You know, so I also want to address the immediate pushback that I'm aware of. So that's like, Brian, how can you talk about this? You never experienced racism. So to that, I'll just say that though that's an assumption, you are correct. You know, to my knowledge, I have not experienced racism directly towards me. But I do want to say this. Though racism and other adversities are not the same, the mindset to overcome racism and other adversities have a lot of overlap. It all boils down to psychology pretty much. You know, overcoming something that has happened to you or another person's behavior. So due to who I am and my psychology background, I have perspectives that maybe someone going through racism isn't aware of. You know, just like I'm sure they have perspectives that I'm not aware of. So my point is, like, for a topic like racism, why not be open to all perspectives on how to overcome it? You know, I believe we as a society need to encourage every voice that is promoting positive messages, trying to empower and not disempower, and take it all in. You know, like, also, I want to say too, it's possible that me being detached from the specific dynamic of racism actually gives me a more objective perspective on it. You know, looking at how to tackle it from the outside looking in. You know, and like this can be applied to other areas of life too. Like a husband and wife, say they're arguing, there's a lot of tension there. Sometimes you go to an outside professional for some support. You know, so even though maybe that professional might be in a relationship themselves, they're still not totally aware of the dynamics of that specific relationship before them. You know, but the idea is you don't need to be 100% aware of an issue in someone's life to offer perspective on it. You know, and really no one is 100% aware on anything, really, unless you're God. You know, so keep all that to heart. You know, someone doesn't inherently have a superior perspective on how to overcome something just because they experienced it. You know, if that was true, counselors, psychologists, doctors, mental health workers wouldn't exist. So see the idea is not the person. And if you disagree with what I'm saying, arguing we should never offer our perspective on something unless we're directly correlated to it and connected to it, then humanity wouldn't evolve to the point that it has. You know, so I ultimately understand pretty much that nothing has ever been done by people shutting up about what's important and what needs to be said. So with that in mind, let's get into how you personally can overcome racism. You know, first you need to understand, you need to validate your feelings of hurt and use them to your advantage in your quest to overcome racist incidents, biases, and everything in your way. You know, embrace your adversity and keep this clip above on the Jumbotron in mind also. You can use your sadness as a positive self-reflection tool to improve, to soul search, to get through something. So don't feel bad about feeling bad pretty much. And I also don't want you to misinterpret this talk as me not validating the severity of your singular experiences or what happened to you. Because feelings are real. So don't feel bad about feeling bad in the moment, but you have to recognize that validation and encouragement are two different things. So you have to oppose accepting your hurt feelings and trauma indefinitely. I do not encourage that. That's no good. You gotta want to grow through it. You know, and you've also got to take pride in overcoming the adversity, such as racism, not just experiencing it. Because anybody can experience it, that's not up to you anyway. But not everyone can overcome it. So that's the first step. the motivation to overcome and not remain a victim to your circumstances or external factors. If you don't have that motivation, then just stop watching this talk, because you're attached to not overcoming, and you're attached to the mental enslavement that racism or whatever situation that you're going through has over you. Real talk, and I say that out of love. And I'll say the same thing to my son too. Validate his feelings, but don't sulk over it indefinitely. Change it. I always think back to a great Maya Angelou quote with this. She said, if you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change your attitude. We as parents need to intentionally raise our children to not have a victim mentality. Even when you are actually a victim, there's still no currency in that, no matter how much society encourages it nowadays. So everybody deals with adversity, whether it's health issues, family issues, learning disabilities, bullying, hate, depression. Viewing yourself negatively from those things is never productive long term. No, instead you gotta focus on having a Victor mentality, demonstrating courage, resilience, open-mindedness. Focus on that. And you may have to think outside the box too to overcome a racist experience you had, or maybe still have. You know, systemic racism or closed-minded people in your life, or a lack of family wealth, all this stuff. But you need to own your circumstance and life. No one is coming to save you from a psychological standpoint. And that's okay. Because you got the power inside, in here. And you've got to take this message to heart. Guys, God is not going to say, Ace, you didn't live up to your potential because of this health issue, because of this thing that happened to you. It's all right. That's not going to happen. We only get one life here on earth. God put it upon us to overcome what he gave to us. You have to ingrain that in your soul if you want to overcome racism. And I want to get deep now. So when you die and your time is up, your life is what it is. You can blame racism, someone, your circumstances, for you not being or accomplishing XYZ in life. But you still have to die with that. So recognize what you're living with right now. Will your potential die with you, or will your greatness live on? In the game of life, there are no excuses on Judgment Day. There's not. It's like in sports. You can't use injury as an excuse if you're suited up to play. When you step between those lines on the court, the game and the opposing player doesn't care if you're playing with a sprained ankle. They don't care if you're at a disadvantage and 5 inches shorter. Being hurt is just an excuse if you're not in the game. So transition that to life. If you're breathing, you're in the game. You have to make something of yourself. You have to win, regardless of the advantages or disadvantages or the obstacles in your way. Don't ever lose faith. And look, for you believers out there, if you don't believe that you can overcome psychologically anything, then you're not a believer, straight up. One thing to say you can't overcome something external, like making it to the NBA if you suck at basketball, or getting a 100% on a final exam if you didn't study. But mentally, any hurt, trauma, or adversity is possible to overcome. Attitude is totally up to you, as Viktor Frankl emphasized in his book, Man's Search for Meaning. You need to prioritize dominating your psychology no matter what. You know, and a motivational speaker that I follow is Eric Thomas. So he once said in his speech called You Are You, or You Owe You, look it up on YouTube, he said, I'm going to do everything in my power to be a victor, not a victim. And he went on to say that there will probably be racism till the day that he dies. But that will not stop him from becoming a millionaire and being one of the best motivational speakers in the world. He's still going to overcome everything that's in his way. So that's a mindset you have to have, period. You know, you can't care about the external. You got to care about the internal, the standard for yourself. And this boils down to just recognizing control. Like, you control yourself, your reaction to what happens to you. So focus on that. Don't put all your mental energies on negativity, whether that's racism or just a negativity that you're going through. Like, mainstream media right now, they want you to live in your racist experiences. They want you to live in your hurt. You gotta fight that off. Don't focus on the racism. Focus on preventing the racism from harming you negatively. So for example, someone called you a name at school 2 years ago. How is internalizing that 2 years later helping you out? Oh hey, let's get a little deeper now. Say yesterday, someone called you a racial slur or the N-word, or on a lower scale, someone made a negative biased comment about your race. How are you going to react to it? Will you let that person own real estate in your brain? Or will you be victorious from a mental standpoint? Think about that. You can be pissed off from what was said, but you gotta rein it in and use the slight or any perceived disadvantage to your advantage, like I explained up here. Like, controlled anger can be positive. When it's uncontrolled anger, it's just being mad. So my post was called Mindset Control, Be Pissed Off. And really quickly, I'll mention what I mentioned in that post. Ray Lewis, a football player in 2000, he went through a lot that year. There was charges against him. He says before games, a lot of the time, people would say racial slurs to him. Okay. And he would overcome that. And he used that to get pissed off. So when he went on the field, he dominated. His team won the championship that year. He used that anger for good. So that's what it's all about. Staying committed to and accomplishing your goals by any positive means necessary through any obstacle. That's how you have to define toughness. Another example from a previous talk on toughness that I did too was Kobe Bryant in the 2009 playoffs. Ron Artest got in his face after one play and was trying to trigger him, was trying to fight. So what did Kobe do? He put his hands up and he backed down. Not because Ron Artest was right to get in his face, but Kobe knew responding back negatively would get him thrown out of the game and hurt his quest to win an NBA championship. He was thinking of himself, not the other person. So same thing with racism. So one example is, say you encounter a cop, you get a racist vibe from them. Think about yourself. Do what you gotta do to survive and stay on track. Don't magnify the incident into a worse outcome for you, even if that cop is trying to set you off. Comply and wait for your day in court, because you got bigger things in store for you, man. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. You gotta ingrain this focus of control idea into your brain. You gotta own your self-improvement above anyone else's self-improvement. Someone else's racism is on them. That's not on you, even if it's directed at you. Also, don't obsess over racism. Let it get you by being paranoid about it. Does you no good. You gotta focus on your goals and what's in front of you and burst through everything in your way. Never assume too that every bad thing or negative result in your life is from racism or any adversity or challenge. Because if you do that, then you give your power to that thing. You live in it and you disempower yourself in the process. So this idea too, it goes to any challenge in life. Like I have chronic fatigue, vertigo, hearing loss. If I obsessed over that challenge and thought constantly about those things and how it's holding me back, I wouldn't get done half of what I get done. And I surely wouldn't be speaking here tonight. That's for certain. So you have to take back your power. Focus on what's important to you. You know, a practical exercise with this too is to create a list of things that give you purpose and joy. And if something isn't on that list, which I assume racism isn't, then don't direct your energies to it as you manifest your life. It's not getting you closer to the best version of yourself, so why focus on it? Always keep this in mind also. Tied to positive psychology. Focus on what you want, not in preventing what you don't want. And racism is what you don't want. And now I want to switch gears a little bit and go in a different direction, because I know what some of the pushback is. It's, well, you have to focus on racism in order to fight it, or there's systemic issues that need to change, and I can't just forget about that. So this is very, very, very important. So my response to all that is this. I know. And you need to separate your individual self as you go through life navigating your goals and your mental health and wellness from the efforts you put into reducing racism in the world or fighting the systemic issues that you care about. That's so important. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. So if fighting racism is something that gives you purpose and joy, there's ways to go about that without suffocating yourself in the process. So let's get into that a little bit. So a sports analogy that I want to mention is, say you're an NBA player. If the refs are blowing an unfair whistle during the game, it's best to let the higher-ups, the coach, deal with it then and there. Because when the clock is ticking, you've got to focus on the game. You've got to focus on your life, and you can't get distracted. You can't let your energies be directed to all this external stuff, no matter if it's unfair or not. You've got to focus on what you control for the outcome of the game. And when the game is over in this scenario, and maybe you're talking to the media, then you can bring it up, because at that point it's a break from the game. So mentally, put this analogy of sports onto racism. You've got to know when it's time to focus on outside issues like racism and when it's not and detrimental to your life. You don't always have racism or any adversity you experience at the front of your mind unless you're consciously using it as a motivating tool. And even when outside of the game too. Don't let your emotions around the topic get the best of you. And I know you may be thinking, oh, well, easy for you to say, Bryant. But look. I'm going to lead you through my logic and you can interpret it as you please. So first off, you can't internalize every racist incident you see on TV or when something happens to your group. You can't be negatively and personally affected by it so much. That is number one. That's not good for your mental health, period. If you do that, you magnify it on a negative level. So why say, oh, this thing happened to us? Well, no, it didn't. This other person is the victim in this. You are not. You are just very literally attaching yourself to the victim in that case. Don't brainwash yourself into believing that. That does you no good. And by the way, if you're insistent to attach yourself to someone, do it to a Victor in a scenario. Imagine and envision yourself as that. I mean, how can you possibly create positive change when you are clouded with emotion, can't think clearly due to re-traumatizing yourself over and over and over again due to your group perspective? You have to really think about that. And I'm going to use an example with other topics right now and make a correlation to racism. So say you're passionate about reducing drinking and driving, or finding a cure for cancer, or just reducing the negative side effects, and you had a loved one that died of each of those things. So it's not healthy in that scenario to research every person who died from these events as you're trying to develop ways to reduce drinking and driving or reduce negative side effects of cancer, because that would lead to more unnecessary hurt and be distracting ultimately. You can be relatively aware, but that's it. You recognize that taking it to your heart is not good for your mental health and the mission of change. And again, don't get this twisted. I mean, you being detached emotionally from the outside stuff is not caring. It's just making sure that you have a clear head to get done what you want, so you can figure out solutions to the topics. Really understand what I'm talking about with all this. I mean, you have to detach emotionally from the outside adversity you're experiencing, from other people, and focus on the controllable aspects of your life, the overcoming part. All this stuff that I'm talking about, it's a mindset shift. It's a mindset shift. And that is how you are going to overcome racism. That's the empowering truth. And that's what they don't want you to hear. So who's they, you may ask? Well, let me break it down for you so you can recognize these people and hopefully ignore the negative messaging that they're spewing as you navigate through life. So first off, number one, they are most of mainstream media. So they don't want you to see this video because they make money from you feeling bad about yourself. They make money off polarization, getting you in your trauma just for the drama. You better believe any racist incident they'll plaster on the news 24/7, while at the same time talking about zero solutions to reduce racism or solve systemic issues because they don't want to actually solve anything. Next up, they are the race hustlers, politicians, and sinister people with power and influence. So they don't want you to see this video because these people play off your fear and hurt. They frame your trauma and racism you've experienced as empowering when they're really just using you. These people never highlight people that don't feel like a victim because it doesn't suit their agenda. The elite, intellectuals and individuals like Ibram, Kendi also fall into this category. Their careers are made out of telling you that you are disadvantaged because of the obstacles in your life. Meanwhile, they're banking hundreds of thousands of dollars and they overcame whatever perceived obstacles they had, but they show little effort into actually giving you tips or tools to overcome racism and obstacles like they did. So the third group is the self-righteous people. So an example is some people in companies. So they don't want you to see this video mainly because they don't give a F about you, even though most act like they do. They just play the let's fight racism game for PR, obviously. And the next group that doesn't want you to see this video is the racist people out there. So they don't want you to see this video because they want you to continue feeling disadvantaged and inferior. So this can come from the privileged group or the oppressed group you're potentially in. So the privileged group may or may not be self-righteous, but they're definitely patronizing. And the thing is with this group is they just want you to just stay down. They just want you to stay down. They want you to maintain your inferiority, and they want to maintain their superiority by proclaiming their racial privilege. No matter how much you want to feel like a victor, they'll remind you of your disadvantages every time they can. And the oppressed group may be so brainwashed by all the other forces I just mentioned that they are attached to not overcoming racism, and they view overcoming racism as almost a betrayal of their own race and their identity. And they frame it as it's a betrayal of your identity too. The individual identity they made up for you based off your supposed group identity, when in reality, it's really just a betrayal of the victim mentality. So it's up to you. It's a psychological war. Racism versus you. Will you make it through victoriously and ace the chart outlined for you, or will you stay mentally enslaved? The choice is yours. Overcome racism. Share the messages, share the videos.